You think you chose to listen to this audio. You think you chose the clothes you are wearing today, the career path you are walking, and the partner you decided to build a life with. You believe with absolute certainty that you are the conscious author of your destiny. But let me shatter that illusion right now. You are not in control. You are a passenger in a vehicle driven by an invisible driver who has been programming your route since the day you were born. The human conscious mind, your analytical, logical self, is nothing more than a high-tech screen. It is a surface interface designed to rationalize and explain decisions that have already been made in the dark, silent depths of your subconscious mind. Think about the last time you promised yourself you would not procrastinate, only to find yourself scrolling through your phone 3 hours later. Think about the last time you promised to stay calm, but a single comment from a coworker made your chest tight and your throat close up, forcing you to snap back with a defensive edge you regretted instantly. You did not choose those reactions. Your subconscious mind ran a pre-installed automated survival script before your conscious brain even realized what was happening. You are being moved by invisible threads, reacting to old code installed in a world that no longer exists. If you want to change your life, you must stop shouting at the screen. You must step behind the curtain, locate the invisible puppet master, and learn how to rewrite the code of your unconscious control. To understand how this silent operating system runs your life, we must look at the concept of the subconscious imprint. When you were a child, between the ages of birth and 7 years old, your brain operated primarily in theta and alpha wave states, highly suggestible frequencies that are identical to hypnosis. During this critical window, you had no conscious analytical filter. You had no firewall to protect your database. Your brain was simply a recording device, absorbing every word, every tense silence, every emotional reaction, and every belief of the adults around you. If you watched your parents constantly argue about money, your brain recorded a baseline code that financial security is scarce and dangerous. If you were criticized for expressing your true thoughts, your brain installed a protection script that says staying quiet is the only way to remain safe. These recordings did not disappear when you grew up. They became the concrete foundation of your reality. Today, as an adult, you look at a business opportunity and experience a sudden, unexplainable wave of anxiety that paralyzes you. You think it is a rational warning, but it's actually your childhood financial threat script running in the background. You are playing a high-stakes game of chess, but half of your pieces are completely invisible to you, moving themselves according to old, unverified rules. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The transition from recognizing the existence of the invisible driver to actively auditing its commands requires us to enter the laboratory of somatic telemetry mapping. Your subconscious mind does not communicate in the vocabulary of English, Arabic, or German. It speaks exclusively in the ancient, non-verbal language of physiological feedback and chemical shifts. Most people remain completely deaf to this internal broadcast, living their entire lives from the neck up. They treat a sudden tightening in their stomach, a shallow restriction in their breathing, or a localized spike in body temperature as random, meaningless physical glitches to be ignored or medicated away. The sovereign master reads these somatic updates as high-resolution diagnostic readouts. When a specific environmental stimulus, such as an unexpected critique from a peer or a sudden boundary push from a partner, triggers an immediate physical contraction, you do not rush to analyze the external event. You trace the physical sensation directly back to its cognitive root. This somatic tightening is the physical shadow of an unconscious limiting belief deploying its defense screens to protect your ego from perceived annihilation. Let us deconstruct the specific mechanics of the subconscious code extraction protocol, the systematic process of converting vague emotional discomfort into explicit, editable data. When you experience a sudden wave of self-doubt, anxiety, or unexplainable anger, you must physically stop and isolate the internal state. You do not ask, "Why am I feeling this way?" which only prompts your rationalizing conscious mind to fabricate a series of logical excuses. Instead, you applied the fictional distancing technique. You imagine your current reaction as a piece of automated software running on an external device, and you ask yourself a sequence of clinical, objective questions. What is the specific, unwritten rule that this situation is violating? What is the worst-case scenario that my system is desperately trying to prevent? If you find yourself procrastinating on a high-value project, this clinical audit will reveal that your system is not lazy. It is running an active protection script that says, if I finish this project and it is judged as imperfect, my true inadequacy will be exposed to the world, so I must withhold my effort to remain safe. The moment you translate this vague feeling into a clear, explicit sentence, the invisible thread is severed. You have dragged the subconscious code into the light of conscious awareness, stripping it of its automated power over your behavior. Furthermore, we must examine the concept of cognitive repetition anchoring and how your daily habits operate as continuous feedback loops that reinforce your existing programming. Every time you allow an unconscious reaction to dictate your behavior, such as checking your phone the moment you feel a microdose of boredom or lashing out the moment your pride is threatened, you are literally strengthening the neural pathways that support that reaction. You are literally training your brain to be more reactive, more fragile, and more dependent on immediate emotional gratification. You are voting with your actions for the continuation of your old limiting identity. Real growth is not a dramatic one-time. Intellectual epiphany is the compound effect of microscopic choices executed in the space between stimulus and response. If you can widen that space by even 3 seconds, using the sudden onset of physical tension as your cue to pause, breathe, and observe, you reclaim your sovereign power to choose a logical, strategic response that aligns with your future self rather than your primitive past. Now that we have mapped the somatic terrain of your programming, we must advance to the limbic gateway bypass, the strategic methodology required to rewrite your deep behavioral software without alerting your brain's active defense scanners. The human brain is equipped with a highly sophisticated psychological defense mechanism known as the critical faculty. This is your mental security firewall, and its primary directive is to maintain homeostatic consistency at all costs. It processes any direct, overt attempt to change your core beliefs as an existential threat to your identity, immediately rejecting the new information and hardening your existing mental boundaries. The bungler attempts to force change by repeating empty positive affirmations in front of a mirror, a low-status strategy that only creates massive cognitive friction because their subconscious mind instantly recognizes the gap between the affirmation and their actual reality, triggering a total system rejection. The sovereign master operates through the art of cognitive insinuation, sneaking the updated coordinates past the security guards when the security guards are looking the other way. To execute a successful cognitive infiltration, you must learn to leverage the hypnagogic state of suggestibility. Twice every single day, your brain's critical faculty naturally goes offline in the brief moments right before you fall asleep and immediately after you wake up in the morning. During these temporal windows, your neural activity shifts out of the logical beta frequency and drops down into the highly fluid theta and alpha waves, the exact same states in which your childhood blueprint was originally recorded. Instead of wasting these precious windows scrolling through social media or running anxious mental simulations about your daily schedule, you must treat this time as your primary reprogramming window. While your analytical firewall is sleeping, you must feed your brain highly specific, sensory-rich visualizations of the identity you want to install. You do not visualize abstract goals like money or status. You visualize yourself executing specific, high-discipline actions with absolute calm and cognitive ease. Your brain processes this mental rehearsal as real physical evidence, building new neural pathways while your body remains completely still. Furthermore, we must master the concept of cognitive reframing through semantic displacement. This is the practice of consciously changing the verbal labels you use to describe your internal experiences, effectively altering the biochemical impact they have on your nervous system. Remember, your subconscious mind does not react to the world itself. It reacts to your linguistic interpretation of the world. If you label a high-stakes presentation or a difficult negotiation as a terrifying ordeal, your amygdala treats the situation as a saber-toothed tiger, flooding your body with stress hormones that shut down your prefrontal cortex. However, if you consciously reframe the physical arousal, the racing heart, the cool sweat, the sharp focus, as intense strategic preparation for a critical deployment, you shift the brain's processing pathway from fear to anticipation. You are not lying to yourself. You are simply choosing the interpretation that optimizes your executive function, transforming a potential threat into a powerful source of motivational fuel. To expand your influence from the self to the external network, we must analyze the double-bind cognitive enclosure, the ultimate methodology for directing the behavioral output of a target node while leaving them with the absolute illusion of personal autonomy. The human brain is hardwired with a primal psychological defense mechanism, an automated survival mechanism that triggers immediate resistance and defensive hostility whenever an individual perceives that an external force is attempting to restrict their freedom of choice. The bungler encounters this resistance head-on, delivering direct, unyielding commands that immediately trigger the target's firewall and result in a total system rejection. The sovereign master bypasses this threat scanner entirely. You do not demand compliance. Instead, you present a highly calibrated spectrum of choices where every single path leads to the exact same strategic outcome. When you look at a target node and ask whether they prefer to deliver the finalized project metrics by the 0-hour mark of the current business cycle, or if their system requires the integration of the secondary asset matrix before they initiate the transmission, you are executing a flawless double bind. To their conscious mind, they appear to be exercising complete, high-status decision-making power as they select their preferred execution path. But to your background auditing subroutines, both options represent the absolute surrender of their deliverables to your coordinate. Because their conscious processor is fully occupied analyzing the technical differences between the two choices, their subconscious system registers the transaction as an exercise of free will, executing your strategic directive with maximum efficiency and zero residual friction. They believe they are leading, yet they are walking directly into your pre-designed architectural container. Furthermore, we must examine the metaphorical camouflage protocol, the precise utilization of indirect storytelling to inject a specific behavioral belief directly into their node. Competitors' unconscious database. If you attempt to convince a defensive colleague or partner that their current operational methodology is flawed, their ego will instantly classify your feedback as a status attack, prompting them to rationalize and defend their position with intense logical static. The sovereign master avoids this direct collision. You construct an objective, third-party narrative about an elite, high-status asset in a completely parallel, non-threatening industry who encountered a structurally identical bottleneck. You describe, with absolute clinical detachment, how this third party achieved unprecedented success by abandoning their old defensive parameters and adopting a highly disciplined new baseline. Because the story is completely decoupled from the target's immediate ego coordinates, their analytical defenses remain offline, allowing them to absorb the narrative with complete intellectual curiosity. As they listen, their subconscious mind automatically executes a background search and compare routine, identifying the structural similarities between the character in the story and their own current bottleneck. They absorb the lesson as a self-generated revelation, presenting the solution to you as their own brilliant organic idea. You do not seek credit for this cognitive seed. You validate their realization with absolute warmth, locking the newly installed programming in place while leaving your strategic footprint completely invisible within the coordinate. To transition from managing external relationships back to the deep mastery of your internal environment, we must now examine the process of somatic emotional transmutation. Most people treat their negative emotions, such as burning anger, paralyzing fear, or suffocating anxiety, as toxic biological waste that must be suppressed, avoided, or medicated out of existence. This is a catastrophic waste of neurological resources. Your negative emotions are not design flaws in your biology. They are high-voltage chemical surges designed to flood your system with raw energy and intense focus. The bungler allows this electrical current to run wild through their motor cortex, causing them to explode in a fit of rage, freeze in a state of panic, or drown in a cycle of silent resentment. They burn down their own house just to release the steam. The sovereign master operates as an emotional alchemist. You recognize that the raw energy of an emotion is completely neutral. It is a biological charge looking for a channel of expression. Instead of fighting the current, you construct a high-resistance physical pipeline that redirects this raw force directly into your most ambitious strategic objectives. Let us deconstruct the specific mechanics of the hydraulic transmutation script, the step-by-step process of converting acute anger into unstoppable operational momentum. When you experience a sudden, intense boundary violation or a significant setback, your amygdala instantly triggers the release of adrenaline and cortisol, sending your heart rate spiking and your muscles tensing for physical combat. The moment you feel this chemical surge rising in your chest, you do not attempt to calm down. Trying to force yourself to be calm when your body is flooded with adrenaline is like slamming on the brakes of a car traveling at 100 miles per hour. It only shreds your internal gears. Instead, you accept the high-voltage current and immediately apply semantic labeling. You state to yourself with flat, clinical focus, "This is not anger. This is a massive injection of raw, focused energy." You then immediately redirect this chemical surge away from the source of the frustration and channel it into a high-demand, high-discipline physical or cognitive task. You write that difficult proposal, you execute that brutal training session, or you systematically solve that complex technical problem that you have been avoiding for weeks. The adrenaline that would have destroyed your relationship is converted into the exact fuel required to break through your personal operational bottlenecks. Furthermore, we must perform a clinical audit of the anxiety to anticipation inversion, a powerful cognitive tool used to neutralize the paralyzing effects of performance stress. In the biological ledger of your nervous system, the physical sensations of intense anxiety, including a racing heartbeat, dry mouth, and heightened sensory awareness, are identical to the physical sensations of intense excitement and anticipation. The only difference between these two states is the conscious story your brain attaches to the physical data. The bungler tells themselves a story of vulnerability and impending disaster, turning the chemical surge into a paralyzing chokehold. The sovereign master alters the narrative template. When your nervous system runs hot before a critical presentation or a high-stakes negotiation, you do not fight the physical sensations. You look at your sweaty palms and racing heart, and you state out loud, "My body is fully preparing its assets for peak performance." By changing the cognitive label from threat to preparation, you redirect the neural pathways in your prefrontal cortex, allowing you to ride the wave of chemical arousal instead of being crushed by it. Let us now investigate the protocol of frictional desensitization, the systematic process of building your tolerance to psychological discomfort through controlled stress exposure. Your subconscious mind is naturally wired to seek homeostasis and avoid pain, a primitive setting that keeps most people trapped in comfortable, low-performance loops. If you only practice emotional control when your environment is quiet and your stress levels are low, your system will instantly crash when faced with real-world chaos. The sovereign master builds emotional resilience during periods of calm, using physical stressors to train the mind's non-reactive baseline. You deliberately introduce controlled discomfort into your daily routine, such as cold water exposure, intense physical conditioning, or public speaking exercises. Furthermore, we must analyze the concept of cognitive defect inversion, the process of transforming your deepest personal insecurities into your most powerful strategic assets. The human mind is naturally wired to compare itself to the surrounding grid, a primitive survival routine that often generates a subconscious sense of deficiency when you perceive that you lack the natural talents, social pedigree, or resources of your competitors. The bungler accepts this deficit as an unchangeable limitation, retreating into a quiet corner of the network to avoid defeat. The sovereign master executes a complete functional inversion. If you possess an analytical, introverted nature that makes you feel awkward in high-volume social settings, you do not attempt to force yourself to become a loud, expressive socialite. Instead, you frame your quietness as a highly restricted, premium asset, utilizing your low-frequency presence to observe the room with clinical detachment, while others exhaust their processing power on superficial displays. You turn your perceived defect into your primary weapon of observation, ensuring you always hold the information advantage within the coordinate. Let us now investigate the protocol of the zero-trace frame disruption, a high-altitude technique designed to shatter an external competitor's unconscious protective programs when they attempt to challenge your authority. Every defensive node in the network maintains a set of subconscious shielding routines designed to preserve their self-image and protect their territory from external manipulation. When they project a hostile challenge or an arrogant display, the bungler enters a defensive analytical loop, attempting to prove their competence and thereby surrendering the frame. The sovereign master deploys subconscious decoupling. You do not fight their challenge, you calmly bypass their logical argument and deliver a highly precise, warm, and supportive statement that completely contradicts their subconscious expectations. You thank them for their intense concern regarding the stability of the project, noting that their high-energy feedback is exactly what your system requires to optimize the current pipeline. This unexpected pairing of their hostility with your high-status validation triggers a massive processing error in their limbic core. Their conscious, logical processors stall, forcing their firewall to go completely offline to resolve the paradox, leaving their strategic position entirely neutralized and under your direct control. To advance your personal sovereignty to its logical zenith, we must now examine the protocol of environmental inoculation, the strategic engineering of your daily physical and informational space to ensure your subconscious mind remains entirely free of parasitic data streams. The human brain is a highly sophisticated organic prediction engine that is continuously mapping its reality based on the frequency and quality of the environmental inputs it consumes. The bungler believes they can achieve absolute emotional mastery while maintaining a daily habit of consuming chaotic news feeds, engaging with highly reactive, low-status social media platforms, and surrounding themselves with volatile, uncalibrated individuals. This is a severe systemic failure. They are trying to build a fortress while voluntarily pouring toxic runoff into their own water supply. The sovereign master enforces ruthless environmental hygiene. You recognize that every single input, every sensory data point, every visual asset, and every conversational exchange acts as a silent, subconscious instruction set that slowly rewires your neural circuitry behind your back. let us deconstruct the specific mechanics of the input audit protocol, the precise methodology for stripping your operational environment of all destabilizing feedback loops. You begin by executing a comprehensive clinical audit of your daily digital and physical consumption channels. You treat any informational source that relies on generating cheap outrage, sensationalist fear, or superficial comparison as a hostile Trojan horse attempting to breach your cognitive firewall. You systematically eliminate these low-status frequencies from your workspace and your personal devices, replacing them with high-density, high-value data channels that reinforce systemic discipline, logical analysis, and strategic thinking. You clean your physical coordinates, organizing your workspace with absolute minimalist precision. A cluttered, chaotic desk is not a sign of creative genius. It is a physical projection of an uncalibrated, fragmented mind that continuously drains your subconscious working memory. By designing a physical space characterized by clean lines, quiet acoustics, and absolute structural order, you send a continuous, silent signal to your nervous system that you are operating from a position of absolute stability and control. Furthermore, we must analyze the concept of subconscious association mapping, the strategic alignment of your immediate peer network to accelerate your emotional development. In the evolutionary physics of the human species, the brain's mirror neuron network is designed to automatically sync your internal neurological velocity with the biological frequencies of the people you spend the most time with. If you associate with individuals who are chronically reactive, anxious, and emotionally unstable, your nervous system will naturally mimic their erratic patterns, slowly degrading your cognitive focus and lowering your resistance to environmental stress. The sovereign master operates with strict relational selectivity. You do not maintain toxic relationships out of nostalgic obligation or a weak desire for social politeness. You build a premium personal network composed exclusively of high-discipline, emotionally mature assets who model absolute composure under pressure. By locking your social coordinates to these elite signals, your brain automatically executes an effortless background tracking routine that elevates your default emotional baseline to match their sovereign frequency. Let us now investigate the protocol of the zero-trace audit, the ultimate conversational feedback loop designed to monitor your own emotional trajectory without triggering your conscious defensive rationalizations. It is a fundamental law of human psychology that the individual is often entirely blind to their own emerging behavioral defects until they manifest as a catastrophic operational failure. To prevent this developmental drift, the sovereign master establishes an objective, high-resolution feedback loop with a highly trusted, emotionally mature mentor or peer. You do not ask for generic, polite validation, you direct them to deliver a clinical, ruthless evaluation of your blind spots, tracking your micro-expressions during conflict, your subtle status-seeking behaviors, and any traces of defensive inflation in your vocabulary. You receive this data with absolute facial stillness and complete clinical gratitude, processing their observations not as personal attacks on your ego, but as raw diagnostic telemetry designed to help you optimize your inner code. By continuously auditing your performance against this objective standard, you ensure your system remains permanently calibrated for elite execution. To expand your internal architecture into an unyielding shield of absolute confidence, we must now investigate the clinical mechanics of sovereign identity projection. Most people seek confidence by looking outward, hoping the surrounding grid will deliver continuous validation tokens, compliments, financial rewards, or social status markers to temporarily soothe their internal doubts. This is the tragic mistake of the bungler. They place their emotional equilibrium entirely at the mercy of variables they cannot control, rendering their system highly volatile and easily manipulated by any peripheral asset that chooses to withhold validation. The sovereign master operates from a position of absolute self-reliance. You recognize that real, unshakable confidence is not an emotional state that you must feel before you take action. It is a clinical, physiological baseline that you actively command through the deliberate alignment of your physical biology, your internal narrative, and your uncompromising commitment to integrity. Let us deconstruct the specific mechanics of the physical dominance loop, the precise manipulation of your somatic telemetry to automatically generate an internal state of absolute confidence. In the ancient evolutionary programming of the human nervous system, your brain is continuously monitoring the physical posture of your body to calculate your relative status and safety within the environment. If you slouch, keep your hands in constant motion, or protect your throat and chest line, through closed, defensive postures, your brain processes these somatic signals as proof that you are under immediate threat, flooding your system with cortisol and anxiety. The sovereign master overrides this loop by enforcing absolute physical stillness. You expand your physical footprint, keeping your shoulders back, your spine perfectly aligned, and your chin parallel to the floor. When you speak, you use slow, deliberate hand gestures that originate from your core rather than frantic movements from your wrists. By commanding your physical biology to mimic the exact telemetry of a high-status sovereign, your nervous system is forced to downregulate its threat response, releasing dopamine and testosterone that naturally generate an internal state of unshakable quiet power. Furthermore, we must perform a clinical audit of the Internal Integrity Alignment Protocol, the process of locking your words and your actions into perfect, unyielding synchronization. There is no greater source of subconscious self-doubt than the quiet accumulation of broken promises to yourself. Every time you state that you will wake up at a specific hour, execute a difficult task, or maintain a healthy boundary, only to abandon the directive the moment your primitive brain demands comfort, you train your subconscious mind to register your own voice as entirely unreliable. You erode your own inner authority, leaving your system weak and easily destabilized by external challenges. The sovereign master treats their word as the absolute law of their coordinate. If you commit to an operational action, you execute it with absolute, ruthless discipline, regardless of how tired, stressed, or unmotivated your conscious mind feels in the moment. By proving to your subconscious mind through consistent daily evidence that you always execute your directives, you build an ironclad inner certainty that makes you completely immune to self-doubt and external intimidation. Let us now investigate the protocol of reflective victory mapping, the deliberate cognitive practice used to permanently immunize your mind against the negativity bias of the amygdala. Your primitive brain is hardwired to remember failures, mistakes, and threats far more vividly than successes, a design setting that was highly useful for survival in a dangerous wilderness, but serves to systematically destroy your confidence in the modern grid. To counteract this bias, you must establish a highly structured daily mental ledger of your operational victories. You do not focus on grand, life-changing achievements. You systematically log every minor instance where you successfully controlled an emotional reaction, executed a difficult task, or maintained absolute composure under pressure. By consciously focusing your attention on this tangible evidence of your growing competence, you force your subconscious mind to update its assessment of your capabilities, constructing a deep, unyielding foundation of confidence that cannot be eroded by temporary setbacks or the criticisms of the surrounding network. To compensate for the deficit and ensure you reach your target word count with the absolute highest quality of content, I have engineered a massive, high-density, and deeply detailed final sequence. This text is formatted as a seamless, continuous block of raw text, completely free of chapters, section numbers, or headings, making it instantly ready for your audio generation pipeline. To achieve the absolute peak of human engineering, we must now transition into the advanced architecture of systemic cognitive flexibility, the process of training your brain to dynamically update its internal predictive models when faced with sudden environmental chaos. The uncalibrated node operates under a rigid, brittle set of subconscious rules, believing that the world must behave in a highly specific, predictable way to remain safe. When an unexpected disruption occurs, such as a sudden market shift, a broken alliance, or a personal betrayal, their rigid programming is shattered, throwing their nervous system into a state of acute panic and paralysis. They're like a dry branch that snaps under the weight of the winter snow. The sovereign master operates with the fluid resilience of water. You recognize that uncertainty is not a threat to your stability. It is the natural, unyielding baseline of the universe. Instead of fighting the current or demanding that reality align with your expectations, you cultivate a state of active mental plasticity. When a crisis hits, you do not lose valuable processing power to grief, anger, or denial. You immediately accept the new data points, run multiple parallel simulations in your mind, and adapt your strategic trajectory to exploit the disruption. You do not survive the storm, you use its kinetic energy to propel your system forward, transforming every unexpected challenge into an immediate competitive advantage. Let us deconstruct the specific mechanics of the subconscious habit deconstruction matrix, the precise behavioral protocol used to dismantle your automated low-value addictions and distractions. Your brain is a highly efficient metabolic machine designed to save energy by converting repeating sequences of behavior into automated subconscious routines. Every time you experience a microdose of mental discomfort, whether it is the frustration of a difficult task, the anxiety of an impending decision, or at the simple boredom of a quiet moment, your subconscious mind automatically executes a pre-installed escape script, prompting you to pick up your phone, consume low-value digital entertainment, or seek immediate physical comfort. The bungler attempts to fight these automated habits with sheer willpower, a weak strategy that fails the moment their mental energy is depleted by daily stress. The sovereign master operates through systematic cue decoupling. You do not try to suppress the urge. Instead, you isolate the exact somatic trigger that initiates the routine. When you feel that sudden, uncomfortable physical contraction in your chest that prompts you to seek distraction, you pause and observe it with clinical curiosity. You allow the physical craving to rise, crest, and dissolve naturally within your nervous system without acting upon it. By repeatedly separating the physical cue from the automated behavioral response, you systematically weaken the underlying neural pathways, permanently deleting the self-sabotaging software from your subconscious operating system. Furthermore, we must examine the protocol of relational Aikido, the ultimate psychological methodology for maintaining absolute, non-reactive presence during high-stakes interpersonal conflicts. In the daily geometry of human relationships, people will constantly project their own unhealed trauma, subconscious insecurities, and uncalibrated anger onto your coordinate. The bungler reacts to these projections with immediate defensiveness, matching their hostility with a sharp verbal counterattack or withdrawing into a state of passive-aggressive silence. This reactive mirroring only validates their threat perception, locking both systems into an endless, destructive loop of escalation. The sovereign master utilizes absolute non-absorption. When a target node attempts to trigger you with a disrespectful comment, an unfair criticism, or an emotional outburst, you maintain complete facial asymmetry and physical stillness. You do not absorb their chaotic energy, nor do you try to defend your reputation. Instead, you observe their behavior as an objective diagnostic readout of their own internal pain. You ask a calm, highly precise question that forces them to reflect on their own words, shifting the focus of the interaction from your competence to their uncalibrated state. By refusing to join their reactive frequency, You remain the immovable anchor of the coordinate, forcing their nervous system to downregulate and align with your sovereign baseline. Let us now investigate the protocol of the Sovereign Operating System integration, the ultimate daily routine designed to maintain your subconscious processors at peak alignment. You cannot hope to master the external network if your internal database is continuously running unverified background scripts of self-doubt, fatigue, and emotional reactivity. True emotional mastery requires a consistent daily commitment to internal hygiene. You treat your mind as a highly restricted technical facility, starting every morning with a calculated period of absolute silence and sensory deprivation. Before you allow any external data streams, such as emails, news, or social media notifications, to enter your processing queue, you execute your daily alignment routines. You practice slow, rhythmic breathing to calibrate your autonomic nervous system, visualize your core strategic objectives for the day, and consciously lock your physical posture into a high-status, open configuration. Throughout the day, you perform regular micro-audits of your internal state, using the transition points of your schedule, such as entering a new meeting, starting a new task, or arriving home, as natural cues to pause, reset your breathing, and realign. Delete any accumulated tension from your system. By maintaining this strict internal discipline, you ensure that you are never reacting to the world. You are always responding from a position of absolute, self-generated sovereignty. Finally, we deconstruct the compound effect of permanent unconscious control. Most people underestimate the monumental impact of these small, daily choices to choose response over reaction. They believe that a single moment of self-control or a single calm conversation is insignificant within the grand timeline of their lives. This is a profound mathematical error. Every single time you choose to pause, regulate your nervous system, and deliver a thoughtful, strategic response instead of an automated reaction, you are not just optimizing that specific interaction, you are physically rewiring the gray matter of your brain. You are growing your prefrontal cortex, shrinking the emotional reactivity of your amygdala, and strengthening the neural highways that support absolute self-mastery. Over months, years, and decades, these microscopic choices compound into an unyielding, unbreakable fortress of personal power. You become the person who remains completely unshakable in the face of absolute chaos, the leader who makes brilliant decisions when the stakes are at their highest, and the sovereign master who commands their reality with quiet, uncontested authority. The old reactive patterns of your childhood are completely erased, replaced by a highly disciplined, elite operating system that runs silently in the background of your life, ensuring your long-term success, pristine physical health, and absolute inner peace remain completely unalterable. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. To truly master the invisible forces that shape our lives, we must first examine the silent phenomenon of passive conditioning and the hidden traps of our brain's default mode network. Imagine your mind as a beautiful, highly advanced garden. If you do not actively choose what to plant in this garden, the wind will carry random seeds from your environment, and before you know it, your fertile ground will be overrun by weeds. These weeds are the passive conditioning we absorb from our childhood, our past failures, the media we consume, and the anxious opinions of the people around us. Most people walk through life with a mind full of psychological weeds, wondering why they constantly feel anxious, unmotivated, or stuck in repeating patterns of self-sabotage. They try to fix their lives by working harder or setting big goals, but they ignore the underlying soil. The truth is that your brain is constantly seeking efficiency. It does not want to expend precious energy thinking consciously about every single action you take.
To save energy, your brain relies on a network of interconnected regions known as the default mode network. This is the mental state that activates when you are not focused on a specific task, when you are driving, washing the dishes, or daydreaming. In an uncalibrated mind, the default mode network becomes a breeding ground for worry, self-criticism, and worst-case scenarios.
Unbend your fingers. Second, shift your physical gaze. Instead of focusing intensely on the source of your stress, widen your peripheral vision, taking in the entire room and the objects around you. This simple shift in focus tells your brain that there are no immediate physical threats in your environment. Third, implement slow, diaphragmatic breathing, inhaling deeply through your nose for 4 seconds and exhaling slowly through your mouth for 6 seconds. By consciously changing your physical state, you bypass your emotional brain and force your nervous system to return to a state of calm, allowing your prefrontal cortex to come back online so you can make decisions based on logic and strategy instead of primitive fear. We must also analyze the profound impact of the imposter blueprint and how it silently sabotages your career and personal growth. Many highly successful, intelligent individuals suffer from a deep-seated belief that they are not truly competent and that at any moment their true inadequacy will be exposed to the world. They view their achievements as results of luck, timing, or deception rather than their own hard work and talent. This unconscious program creates a constant state of low-level anxiety, forcing them to overwork themselves to the point of burnout, avoid high-stakes opportunities that could advance their careers, or settle for relationships and positions that are far below their true potential. The origin of this blueprint almost always lies in early developmental environments, where love, validation, and acceptance were conditional upon high achievement. If you were praised only when you brought home perfect grades or won competitions, your subconscious mind recorded a rule that says, "I am only valuable when I am perfect, and if I fail, I will be rejected and abandoned." As an adult, this rule manifests as a paralyzing fear of making mistakes, causing you to scrutinize every email, avoid taking creative risks, and constantly seek external approval to validate your worth. To dismantle this blueprint, you must cultivate the attitude of intellectual humility and embrace the concept of progress over perfection. You must realize that mistakes are not evidence of your inadequacy. They are the fundamental building blocks of competence and skill development. When you can view a failure not as a reflection of your identity, but as a neutral data point that shows you where to adjust your strategy, you strip the imposter blueprint of its power, allowing you to step into your true potential with confidence and authentic strength. Let us now investigate how to navigate external emotional storms and remain a calm, stabilizing anchor when the people around you are losing their minds. In your daily life, you will inevitably encounter individuals who are highly reactive, stressed, or emotionally volatile, whether it's an angry boss, an overwhelmed partner, or a frustrated friend. Because emotions are highly contagious through the activity of mirror neurons in our brains, our natural instinct is to match their chaotic energy. If they raise their voice, we raise ours. If they become defensive, we attack. This reactive mirroring only amplifies the conflict, creating a toxic feedback loop. Scenario planning. It replays your past embarrassing moments, magnifies your current insecurities, and projects a future full of failure. You become a victim of your own mind's automatic patterns, running a default program that was written by your past experiences rather than your conscious desires. To take back control, you must learn how to interrupt this default network and actively guide your thoughts back to the present moment, transforming your brain from an automatic worry machine into a focused tool for growth and success. Consider how this passive conditioning manifests in your daily relationships and professional choices. Have you ever noticed that you tend to overreact to specific types of people or situations? Perhaps a certain tone of voice from your partner instantly makes you defensive, or a minor delay in a colleague's response makes you feel anxious and unappreciated. These are not rational, conscious reactions to the present moment. They are emotional echoes from your past. Your brain has filed away every moment of rejection, criticism, or abandonment you have ever experienced, and it uses these files to predict future threats. When someone behaves in a way that slightly resembles a past painful experience, your amygdala sounds the alarm, flooding your system with stress hormones and forcing you to react with anger, defensiveness, or withdrawal. You are essentially fighting a battle in the present using weapons and strategies from your childhood. This emotional reactivity destroys relationships, ruins career opportunities, and keeps you trapped in a cycle of regret. To break this cycle, you must develop the ability to separate the present reality from your past projections. You must learn to look at the person in front of you not through the lens of your old wounds, but with absolute clarity and objective awareness. When you can pause in the middle of an emotional trigger, acknowledge the old memory rising within you, and choose a calm, logical response, you are physically rewiring your brain, breaking the chains of passive conditioning and unlocking true emotional freedom. Let us now explore the practical mechanics of the somatic centering technique, a powerful, real-time physical intervention designed to calm your nervous system and restore clear thinking when you are in the middle of a high-stress situation. When you experience an emotional trigger, your brain undergoes a physical transformation. Blood flow is redirected away from your prefrontal cortex, the logical, planning part of your brain, and sent directly to your primitive survival systems, preparing you for fight or flight. This is why it is nearly impossible to think rationally when you are angry or anxious. Your brain has literally shut down your capacity for logic. To reverse this process, you cannot rely on willpower alone. You must use your body to send a physical signal of safety back to your brain. The moment you feel the physical warning signs of stress, a tight chest, a rapid heartbeat, or a sudden rush of heat, you must immediately execute a 3-step physical reset. First, deliberately soften your physical posture. Release the tension in your jaw, drop your shoulders, unbend your fingers. Second, shift your physical gaze. Instead of focusing intensely on the source of your stress, widen your peripheral vision, taking in the entire room and the objects around you. This simple shift in focus tells your brain that there are no immediate physical threats in your environment. Third, implement slow, diaphragmatic breathing, inhaling deeply through your nose for 4 seconds and exhaling slowly through your mouth for 6 seconds. By consciously changing your physical state, you bypass your emotional brain and force your nervous system to return to a state of calm, allowing your prefrontal cortex to come back online, so you can make decisions based on logic and strategy instead of primitive fear. We must also analyze the profound impact of the imposter blueprint and how it silently sabotages your career and personal growth. Many highly successful, intelligent individuals suffer from a deep-seated belief that they are not truly competent and that at any moment their true inadequacy will be exposed to the world. They view their achievements as results of luck, timing, or deception, rather than their own hard work and talent. This unconscious program creates a constant state of low-level anxiety, forcing them to overwork themselves to the point of burnout, avoid high-stakes opportunities that could advance their careers, or settle for relationships and positions that are far below their true potential. The origin of this blueprint almost always lies in early developmental environments where love, validation, and acceptance were conditional upon high achievement. If you were praised only when you brought home perfect grades or won competitions, your subconscious mind recorded a rule that says, "I am only valuable when I am perfect, and if I fail, I will be rejected and abandoned."
As an adult, this rule manifests as a paralyzing fear of making mistakes, causing you to scrutinize every email, avoid taking creative risks, and constantly seek external approval to validate your worth. To dismantle this blueprint, you must cultivate the attitude of intellectual humility and embrace the concept of progress over perfection. You must realize that mistakes are not evidence of your inadequacy. They are the fundamental building blocks of competence and skill development. When you can view a failure not as a reflection of your identity, but as a neutral data point that shows you where to adjust your strategy, you strip the imposter blueprint of its power, allowing you to step into your true potential with confidence and authentic strength. Let us now investigate how to navigate external emotional storms and remain a calm, stabilizing anchor when the people around you are losing their minds. In your daily life, you will inevitably encounter individuals who are highly reactive, stressed, or emotionally volatile, whether it is an angry boss, an overwhelmed partner, or a frustrated friend. Because emotions are highly contagious through the activity of mirror neurons in our brains, our natural instinct is to match their chaotic energy. If they raise their voice, we raise ours. If they become defensive, we attack. This reactive mirroring only amplifies the conflict, creating a toxic feedback loop.
Destroys trust and prevents actual problem solving. To maintain your emotional sovereignty in these moments, you must implement the observer frame. Imagine that the angry or reactive person in front of you is not attacking you personally, but is simply a patient displaying symptoms of a psychological fever. Their anger and hostility have nothing to do with you. They are physical expressions of their own internal pain, fear, and lack of coping skills. When you can view their behavior through this clinical, compassionate lens, your defensive threat scanners remain offline. You do not absorb their stress. Instead, you speak with a slow, calm, and deliberate cadence, using your vocal frequency to downregulate their nervous system. By remaining a steady, non-reactive presence, you break their emotional momentum, forcing their brain to match your calm frequency and opening the door for constructive, logical communication. Furthermore, we must examine the concept of strategic habit architecture and how to construct a daily routine that leverages the power of your subconscious mind to automate your success. Most self-improvement advice focuses heavily on willpower and self-discipline, demanding that you force yourself to go to the gym, eat healthy, or work on your goals through sheer mental effort. This is a highly flawed strategy because willpower is a finite cognitive resource that is easily depleted by the daily stresses of life. By the end of a long, exhausting workday, your conscious brain is tired, and your subconscious mind automatically defaults back to its oldest, most comfortable habits, like eating processed foods, watching television, or scrolling through your phone. Real change is not about fighting your subconscious mind. It is about designing your environment and your routines so that your desired behaviors require zero willpower to execute. You must learn to use the habit loop matrix, which consists of 3 parts: the cue, the routine, and the reward. If you want to build a daily habit of reading or working on a creative project, you must make the cue highly visible and obvious in your environment. Place the book on your pillow or set up your laptop on your desk the night before. Next, make the routine as easy as possible to start. Do not promise yourself that you will write for 2 hours. Promise yourself that you will write for just 2 minutes. Once you start, the friction disappears and your subconscious mind easily continues the task. Finally, immediately deliver a positive reward to your brain after completing the routine, such as a warm cup of coffee, a moment of relaxation, or a conscious acknowledgement of your progress. By systematically aligning your cues, routines, and rewards, you turn positive behaviors into automated habits that run silently in the background of your life, ensuring your long-term success becomes an effortless, natural outcome of your daily existence.
Let us also look at the massive compound interest of these small daily choices to choose response over reaction in every area of your life. When you decide to pause and take a breath instead of firing back an angry text, it seems like a minor event.
When you choose to step away from your computer and stretch instead of scrolling through social media when you feel bored, it feels insignificant. But these micro choices are the physical investments that determine the structural architecture of your brain. Every single time you choose to manage your internal state, you are weakening the old reactive neural pathways in your amygdala and strengthening the logical, self-controlled pathways in your prefrontal cortex. You are physically sculpting your brain for resilience, confidence, and peace. Over a lifetime, the difference between a person who reacts automatically to every environmental trigger and a person who thoughtfully chooses their response is the difference between a life of constant conflict, regret, and limitation, and a life of profound success, deep relationships, and unshakable inner power. You have the tools, the science, and the mental frameworks required to take back control of your life. The invisible puppet strings of your past conditioning are being cut one by one. You are no longer a passenger in your mind. You are the sovereign director of your destiny. The signal is absolute, the path is clear, and you are entirely in control. To truly cement this new operating system within your daily existence, we must address the final critical component of long-term behavioral change, the strategic cultivation of cognitive margin. In today's hyper-connected, fast-paced landscape, your brain is constantly being bombarded by an unprecedented volume of micro-decisions, sensory notifications, and emotional demands. If you fill every single second of your day with active processing, answering emails the second they arrive, listening to podcasts while you walk, and constantly planning your next professional move, you deplete your prefrontal cortex of the metabolic energy it needs to regulate your emotions when a real crisis occurs. You leave your system running with zero spare capacity. The sovereign master deliberately engineers daily zones of absolute non-activity, what psychologists call intentional boredom. You set aside 10 to 15 minutes every day to simply sit, walk, or breathe without any external inputs, screens, or goals. This deliberate silence allows your brain to clear its active working memory, process background emotional data, and restore your cognitive energy reserves. It builds the mental buffer that allows you to remain calm and analytical when everyone else is reacting in panic. Furthermore, you must recognize the hidden traps of the momentum illusion. When you first begin implementing these emotional control techniques, you will likely experience a sudden wave of motivation and early success. You will stay calm during a heated argument, make a highly rational decision under pressure, or establish a productive morning routine. This early progress triggers a surge of dopamine, making you feel completely invincible. But this is where most people fail. They assume that because they have successfully managed their emotions for a week, their old reactive childhood programs have been permanently erased. They drop their guard. Stop practicing their daily routines and return to their old environmental habits. When a major stressor inevitably hits, their system crashes, throwing them back into their default mode of reactivity and self-doubt. You must realize that emotional mastery is not a destination you reach and then abandon. It is a continuous, daily process of calibration and maintenance. It is like physical fitness. You do not go to the gym for a month and expect to remain strong for the rest of your life without ever lifting another weight. You must treat your daily emotional routines, the slow breathing, the somatic tracking, the cognitive reframing, as non-negotiable hygiene protocols that you execute with absolute consistency, regardless of how motivated or tired you feel in the moment. As you step forward into this new era of your life, remember that the goal is not to become a cold, unfeeling machine. It is not about suppressing your humanity or pretending you do not experience pain, fear, or frustration. Real emotional control is about expanding the space between what you feel and how you choose to behave. It is about feeling the full, raw intensity of your human emotions, acknowledging their presence without judgment, and then having the absolute freedom to choose a response that serves your values, your relationships, and your long-term vision. This is the ultimate expression of human freedom. You are no longer at the mercy of your primitive survival scripts or the emotional noise of the surrounding grid. You are the architect of your internal world, the sovereign director of your behavior, and the master of your own destiny. The old threads have been cut. The new operating system is fully installed. The signal is absolute, and you are entirely in control.